I moved into the Maple Bridge community on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. Raindrops pelted the windshield of the small moving truck as I guided it carefully through the narrow suburban streets. My new house, a modest two-story with a wraparound porch and a neatly trimmed lawn, was near the entrance to the neighborhood. Towering oak trees lined the sidewalks, casting dancing shadows along the pavement. Decorative lampposts flickered on as the overcast sky grew darker, and the crisp air smelled of wet leaves mixed with faint hints of freshly mowed grass from other yards. The place seemed idyllic. Families strolled with dogs on leashes, and I could see children racing on bicycles in the distance. It was the epitome of a quaint American neighborhood. Exactly what I thought I wanted when I made the decision to leave the hectic life of city skyscrapers for a calmer setting. The irony, of course, was that my own profession was anything but calm. As the CEO of a multinational electric vehicle company, I was used to hustle, bustle, and ceaseless phone calls. But I craved a sanctuary, a place to relax after long days spent traveling, negotiating deals, and pushing forward innovative designs that, I hoped, would help change the transportation industry for the better. Despite my high-profile career, I intended to keep a low profile here in Maple Bridge. My job was demanding, but nobody in the neighborhood needed to know my title or the sway I held in certain corporate and political circles. I wanted genuine connections, or at least peaceful solitude. Thus, I wore casual clothes, jeans, old sneakers, a comfortable t-shirt, and made an effort to avoid showing up in an expensive car or anything flashy. In fact, the only immediate sign of my involvement in electric vehicles might be the sleek EV I parked quietly in my driveway. Still, many people had EVs these days, so I didn't think it would raise too many eyebrows. Unbeknownst to me, Maple Bridge came with an extensive set of rules. I learned about them when I received a welcome packet from the Homeowners Association. The manila folder was stuffed with brightly colored pamphlets, forms, and a thick booklet of bylaws. The Maple Bridge Homeowners Association, HOA, had meticulously detailed every guideline, from acceptable exterior paint colors to how tall a tree could grow before being trimmed. I tried not to be alarmed by the length of these regulations. After all, I reasoned, HOAs can help preserve a neighborhood's appearance and property values. Still, something about the tone of the instructions felt a bit strict. I brushed that feeling aside. Maybe the folks here just took pride in their surroundings. I couldn't fault anyone for wanting a clean, orderly place to live. I spent the next few hours unpacking, lugging boxes up the porch, and stacking them in the foyer. Occasionally, people paused on their evening walks to wave. A few even introduced themselves briefly. One older man, wearing a baseball cap, said, "Glad to have you here," and carried on. Overall, people seemed pleasant enough. As darkness fell, I finally collapsed onto my new couch with a sigh of relief. And then came a crisp knock at the door, a knock both prompt and oddly authoritative. When I opened it, I found a middle-aged woman with carefully styled ash-blonde hair, wearing a pastel green cardigan and slacks. She had a wide, practiced smile. In one arm, she held a clipboard. In the other, a stack of booklets similar to the one I'd already received. This was my first introduction to Brenda Armitage, though I'd later learned that her not-so-secret nickname around the neighborhood was Karen, due to a certain style of imposing, self-righteous aggression that would become all too familiar. "Hello," she said brightly, adjusting the weight of the clipboard in her arms. "I'm Brenda Armitage, but you can call me Brenda. I'm the vice president of the Maple Bridge Homeowners Association. Welcome to our wonderful community." With that, she extended a hand for a firm, almost businesslike handshake, then handed me another printed guide, this one labeled Quick Reference Rules for New Residents. I took it politely. "Nice to meet you, Brenda," I said, forcing a smile. "I appreciate the warm greeting." Her lips tightened into a grin, and she surveyed the partially opened boxes in my hallway. "I see you're still unpacking. If you have any questions about the neighborhood, any at all, feel free to ask. I'm always here to help ensure everyone follows the guidelines for a harmonious community." I sensed a slight emphasis on follows the guidelines, but I gave a nod. "Sure, thanks. I'm still trying to settle in." She promptly glanced at the electric vehicle parked outside, then back to me. Her expression suggested she was cataloging every detail. The color of my car, my half-unpacked living room, the scuff marks on the porch. "Lovely EV," she remarked. We do have specific rules about how EV chargers are to be installed, but you can read them in the packet. We have designated charging areas as well, in case you didn't want to go through the trouble of installing your own station in your garage. Thanks, I said. I'll keep that in mind. Good night, Brenda. She lingered a moment too long, as though expecting me to invite her in or ask further questions. Finally, with another forced smile, she turned and vanished into the drizzling darkness. I closed the door, an uneasy feeling nagging at me. Something about Brenda's demeanor suggested a woman used to being in control. I hoped I wouldn't end up on her bad side. Little did I know, she could be quite the menace when she wanted to be. The first few days in Maple Bridge were relatively peaceful. I managed to unpack most of my belongings, set up my home office, and settle into a comfortable routine. Mornings found me jogging around the neighborhood's manicured sidewalks, nodding politely to other early risers. Evenings, I fiddled with dinner while scanning business emails. From time to time, I fielded calls from my company's executive team across the world. Some nights I had to stay up late for international Zoom meetings. Still, I welcomed this environment compared to the stressful city hustle I'd known for years. Despite the tranquil facade, I began to notice little indications of the HOA's overreach. A neighbor, Gary, told me that Brenda had recently fined him $100 for leaving his garbage can curbside an hour too long after trash pickup. Another resident, Linda, confided that she had received a warning letter for planting a flower that was not on the approved shrubs and blooms list. At first, I found these stories almost comical, but as the incidents piled up, an unsettling pattern emerged. Brenda, it seemed, wielded her vice presidency of the HOA with a heavy hand. She moved around the community with the self-assured air of a feudal lord, making pronouncements and handing out warnings for even the smallest infractions. I heard whispered complaints about her know-it-all nature. Despite her outward politeness, she had a habit of belittling people if she deemed them incompetent or uncooperative. The younger families in the neighborhood had taken to calling her Karen behind her back, an allusion to her quickness to demand to speak to the manager in any scenario. But it was more than just a humorous label. There was genuine resentment towards her overbearing style. I, for my part, tried to keep my head down. I wanted no trouble, especially not from the HOA. My property was well maintained and free of any rule violations, as far as I knew. But trouble found me anyway. The first sign that Brenda had turned her gaze my way came in the form of a letter slid under my door. It was typed and formal, signed with her distinctive curly flourish. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you possess an electric vehicle that you may wish to charge on-site. Please be advised that any form of exterior-level electrical wiring or modification to the premises requires prior approval by the Maple Bridge HOA Board. Failure to comply may result in fines. We encourage all residents to utilize the designated community charging stations near the clubhouse and pool. If you have already installed a charger in your garage, please submit the proper documentation to the HOA within 7 days to avoid penalties. Sincerely, Brenda Armitage, Vice President, Maple Bridge Homeowners Association. I read through the letter twice, my temper creeping upward. I had not installed anything. My EV charged perfectly fine with the standard Level 2 setup that already existed in the house's garage from the previous owner. The notion that I needed approval for a pre-existing fixture was laughable. But, not wanting to start a fight, I dutifully compiled the relevant paperwork, a simple receipt from the home's prior occupant that verified the charger had been installed professionally and up to code. I mailed it off the next day. 2 days later, while driving out to the store for groceries, I noticed Brenda standing in her driveway, arms folded across her chest. She narrowed her eyes at me as I passed. I gave her a polite wave. She did not wave back. That night, another letter arrived, this one detailing an urgent concern about the possibility of me charging overnight and disturbing local electrical load distributions. I could scarcely believe my eyes. Brenda claimed that extended EV charging could destabilize the power system for the entire street if performed incorrectly, and that the HOA demanded the right to inspect the installation. It was nonsense from an engineering standpoint. With modern infrastructure, a single EV, or even multiple EVs, was not going to blow the neighborhood transformer. Of course, none of this was rocket science to me. I had entire teams of engineers at my disposal who had designed advanced EV technology. But the average homeowner might not know how thoroughly misinformed Brenda's letter was. Finally, I fired back a polite but firm email. I assure you that my EV charger has been installed to meet all relevant codes. No concerns about electrical load are warranted, but if you wish to send an approved inspector to verify, that is fine. Please let me know who, specifically, and I will be happy to accommodate. I never received a direct response. Yet, Brenda's watchful gaze grew more intense each day I stayed in Maple Bridge. I sensed I was now under her microscope, and something told me it wouldn't end well. At the end of my first month in Maple Bridge, a community-wide notice arrived in my mailbox, an invitation to the monthly HOA meeting. It was to be held at the clubhouse near the entrance of the subdivision, a large open space adorned with chairs and a small podium. This would be my chance to see the HOA leadership in action and to meet more neighbors. I arrived to find about 50 people milling around in folding chairs or leaning against the walls. A wave of chatter filled the air, punctuated by subdued laughter and the occasional exasperated sigh. There, at the center of it all, sat Brenda, impeccably dressed in a crisp white blouse and pencil skirt, smiling her same perfunctory smile. She occupied a seat next to an older gentleman I recognized from the neighborhood, a man named Harold, who was presumably the HOA president. I took a seat near the back of the room. Within minutes, a woman with curly black hair slid into the seat beside me. "First time?" she asked in a whisper, seeing that I was flipping through the printed agenda with a vaguely puzzled expression. "Yeah," I said, extending a hand. "I'm new to Maple Bridge." She cut me off with a bright grin. "I know who you are, or at least I know you're that new homeowner on Oakmont Drive. I'm Linda Garrison. Welcome. Don't worry, these meetings are usually just Brenda talking and the rest of us listening, with Harold chiming in now and then." Linda explained that she'd been living in Maple Bridge for 3 years. She didn't have any official role with the HOA, but tried to stay informed. Quickly, she offered some advice. "Be careful around Brenda," she said in a low tone. "She's the reason we all get so many letters about inconsequential violations. She likes the power." As if on cue, the meeting began with Brenda tapping the microphone. She launched into a bullet point list of neighborhood updates, landscaping budgets, upcoming block parties, new guidelines for mailbox styling. Harold occasionally nodded or added a small correction. After a while, Linda leaned toward me and whispered, "He's effectively just a figurehead. Brenda runs the show. Everybody knows it." When the topic shifted to sustainable living initiatives, my ears perked up. Brenda began discussing the community charging stations near the pool house, a set of 4 EV charging stalls installed a year ago. According to Brenda, the stations were lightly used and an expensive resource that might need reevaluation. Then she added, "However, certain new residents appear to be bringing more electric vehicles into Maple Bridge, so we have to consider fair usage policies." I felt my heart sink. Her tone was ominous, as though she'd singled me out, even if she didn't mention me by name. She continued, "If any of you have concerns about the safety or cost of these chargers, please email me, and I will personally file a motion to limit their usage to authorized times or possibly remove them if they're deemed unnecessary expenses." Linda glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I whispered, "Is she always like this?" Linda shrugged. "Yes and no. She's taking a particular interest in EVs lately, probably because she sees them as an easy target. She's told some folks that she considers them pretentious statements." Linda rolled her eyes. "I guess she thinks only fancy people drive them. She doesn't realize times have changed and that many of us want environmentally conscious options." After the meeting adjourned, I stuck around to mingle. A handful of neighbors approached me, offering everything from gardening tips to recommended restaurants in town. One older couple, June and Bill, confided that they'd stopped using the community chargers because Brenda harassed them about plugging in for too many hours. Another neighbor, Oliver, told me that Brenda had once threatened to padlock the chargers if residents didn't follow the posted sign, which limited charging to a mere 2 hours at a time, an impossibly short window for a full charge in most vehicles. Several neighbors chuckled grimly when I mentioned that Brenda had sent me letters about my private garage charger. As we parted ways, Linda gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry. If you need any backup when it comes to all this EV drama, let me know. A good number of us are on your side. We're just not sure how to stand up to Brenda's iron grip." I thanked her, feeling both uneasy and strangely determined. On one hand, I wanted a peaceful life, not a power struggle. On the other hand, something about the situation stoked my sense of justice. I had long believed in accessible, sustainable transit solutions, and seeing them sabotaged by one petty individual infuriated me. But, mindful of my job, I kept quiet about my actual occupation and professional expertise. I wasn't quite ready to reveal I had the corporate muscle to challenge Brenda's nonsense in a big way. At least not yet. Life in Maple Bridge grew steadily more uncomfortable. Brenda found new ways to exert her authority, randomly stopping by my property to inspect the yard, handing out petty warnings, and even scolding neighbors for trivial matters like driving too slowly on the main street. She cultivated a small group of sycophants who seemed eager to follow her lead, possibly in hopes of receiving favorable treatment from the HOA. Meanwhile, the rest of us walked on eggshells, trying to avoid confrontation. One chilly Saturday morning, I decided to use the community chargers for a quick top-up while I went for a jog around the clubhouse area. It was purely symbolic, as I could charge just fine at home, but I figured I might as well see how the system worked. As I pulled up, I noticed two other vehicles already there, both small sedans plugged in. A sign in bold letters read, 2-hour charging limit. No exceptions. That was Brenda's doing, according to Linda and others. The official property manager had wanted a 4-hour limit, but Brenda had forced them to reduce it. We can't have cars hogging valuable space, she'd apparently insisted. I plugged in, set my charging schedule on the vehicle screen, and headed off for my jog. The crisp morning air felt good. I completed my usual route around the clubhouse and pool, passing by the small man-made pond that reflected the overcast sky. By the time I circled back to the chargers, I'd been gone maybe 45 minutes. To my astonishment, Brenda was there, her pastel coat fluttering in the breeze. She held her phone in one hand, presumably timing the vehicles. She wore an expression of triumph, as though she'd just caught someone in a heinous act. When she saw me approach, she brightened with a too-sweet smile. "Good morning," she called, her voice carrying a note of haughty suspicion. "Jogging, I see. Don't you just love our neighborhood amenities?" I smiled back coolly. "Yes, the paths are well-maintained. Thanks." She gestured at the charger my vehicle occupied. "I'm here making sure nobody exceeds the time limit. I see you've still got an hour 15 left before you reach the 2-hour mark. But just be careful, or I'll have to record your license plate if you go over." "Noted," I said. "I have no intention of overstaying." Brenda pursed her lips. "Just keep in mind, someone else might need that charger. It wouldn't be fair for you to hog it." Her tone suggested she believed I was likely to break the rule. I unhooked the cable from my car, though I really could have used more charge. "I think I'm fine with the charge I got," I remarked, making a point to smile as politely as I could. "Thanks for watching out for the community." She tried to disguise her annoyance at my refusal to take the bait. "Just doing my job," she said, flipping the end of her scarf over her shoulder. Then, in a voice that rang with condescension, she added, "A lot of folks here want to remove these chargers. They say we don't need them, but I'm giving them a chance." I shut my car door, thinking how bizarre it was for an HOA to push for fewer amenities, particularly ones that were, in broader society, considered progressive steps toward clean energy. But I only said, "Have a great day, Brenda," and drove off. My anger simmered beneath the surface. Still, I reminded myself that the best course was to keep calm, avoid a direct battle until I had a plan. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that the neighborhood rumor mill was in full swing. Stories circulated that Brenda wanted to impose special EV fees on any homeowner with an electric vehicle, supposedly to cover wear and tear on the roads from heavier cars, an argument that was both questionable and out of scope for a typical HOA. Another rumor claimed she was secretly pressing city council members to pass an ordinance banning overnight street parking of EVs. While I wasn't sure how true these rumors were, the environment was undoubtedly tense. I confided in Linda and Oliver. They lamented that Brenda's tactics were wearing everybody down, but the HOA board rarely opposed her. She had a cunning knack for forging alliances and stoking fear. A few neighbors had tried to push back in the past, but eventually grew tired or were intimidated by her threatened fines. The prospect of months of petty harassment wore people out. That was when I started to think. If Brenda wanted to wage war on EVs, she had unknowingly picked a fight with exactly the wrong person. Because while I'd arrived intending to keep my professional identity low-key, I realized the well-being of this community and the principle of supporting a sustainable future might force me to reveal who I was. Maybe I could encourage Maple Bridge to embrace modern solutions, instead of allowing one woman's ignorance and arrogance to dominate. Little did I know, things were about to escalate in ways I hadn't imagined. One Sunday afternoon, I invited Linda, Oliver, and the older couple, June and Bill, over for a casual backyard barbecue. As we relaxed under the shade of a large oak tree, we exchanged stories about our experiences in Maple Bridge. Inevitably, the conversation turned to Brenda's antics. Back when the chargers were first installed, Bill said, flipping a hot dog on the grill, there was a sense of excitement. The developer had some grant from the state for sustainable initiatives. People came from nearby areas just to see how an HOA was integrating EV charging so smoothly. June nodded. That was before Brenda seized on her role in the board. She convinced Harold that the chargers were an unnecessary liability. She claimed they'd bring in strangers from outside the community or that they might malfunction and cause fires. It was all nonsense, but Harold is too mild-mannered to stand up to her. Oliver sipped a cold soda. I've tried explaining to her that well-designed chargers are extremely safe. She just waves me off and talks about how she read some research paper that says otherwise. Probably some sensationalized blog post. Linda gave me a look. You know, you have a lot of knowledge about EVs, right? Maybe you could do a presentation at the next HOA meeting. Explain the benefits, how minimal the actual costs are, etc. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to keep my identity as the CEO of an international EV company under wraps. I feared that revealing it might attract attention I didn't want. On the other hand, a more public approach might help the situation. I could consider it, I said carefully, but I'm not sure Brenda wants to hear anything that contradicts her views. Our conversation was cut short by the sharp squeal of car brakes out front. We all turned to see Brenda pulling up to the curb in her late model SUV. She hopped out, wearing oversized sunglasses, and strode up my driveway. She paused at the fence, scanning the small gathering in my backyard. I went to greet her, forcing a welcoming expression. Hello, Brenda. What brings you here? She adjusted her sunglasses, ignoring my question. Then, pointing at the grill, she said, I trust that's a properly approved grilling device. We do have regulations about open flames. I blinked in surprise. Yes, of course. It's a standard propane grill. Nothing unusual. She gave a curt nod. I also want to remind everyone that any gatherings larger than 10 people require prior HOA notification, especially if you'll be using amplified music. I wouldn't want you to face any complaints from neighbors. I counted quickly. There were 5 of us total, plus me. That was 6, well under the threshold. I glanced around, perplexed. We're not playing any music, Brenda, and there are only 6 of us here. Just making sure you're aware. Her voice was tight. Then she finally got to her apparent main point. Anyway, I'm here about the upcoming board vote regarding the EV chargers. I assume you've seen the notice? We're going to vote on whether to scale them back or possibly remove them entirely. Oliver approached, crossing his arms. You can't remove them entirely. We paid for their installation with neighborhood funds, matched by a state grant. Brenda offered a patronizing smile, which is why we're having a vote. The majority will decide. If the majority wants to rid ourselves of the chargers, we'll do so. It's a democracy. Her tone made it clear that she expected to sway that majority in her favor. I was barely able to contain my frustration. Brenda, do you have any tangible justification for removing resources that actually help residents? Her eyes flicked toward me. I have concerns about liabilities and potential misappropriation of HOA funds. She let the implication linger. And I'm sure many residents will stand with me. Now, she said, clearing her throat, enjoy your barbecue. I'll see you at the vote. She turned on her heel and left. We watched her drive away, tension hanging in the air. Linda exhaled. And there you have it. She's going for the kill. She wants those chargers gone. She's going to spin some story about them being dangerous or wasteful and manipulate the board. I folded my arms. If she wins that vote, it sets a terrible precedent. Not just for our neighborhood, but for any place trying to modernize. She's spreading misinformation. June laid a hand on my arm. Don't blame yourself. She's always been this way. But if you have ideas to stop her, you'll have our support. I nodded, silently thanking them. A storm was brewing in Maple Bridge, and I had a feeling we were all going to get caught in the middle. Whether I liked it or not, I was being dragged into a conflict that demanded more than a discreet approach. Maybe, I thought, it was time to fight back with actual expertise and with the resources I had at my disposal as a CEO in the EV world. 2 days later, I took an early morning flight to Chicago for an important corporate event. One of our partner firms was unveiling a new electric sedan, and I was expected to deliver a keynote address. While waiting in the VIP lounge, I found my mind drifting back to Maple Bridge. Once upon a time, dealing with a petty HOA would have been the least of my worries. But Brenda's aggression had made it a near-constant source of anxiety. I called Linda on a break from the conference, explaining I would be out of town for a week. She updated me on a new rumor swirling around the neighborhood. Brenda was encouraging residents to come to the next HOA meeting en masse to vote the chargers out. She was apparently making dire claims about the alleged electric hazard the chargers posed. She's booking half-hour slots with neighbors, going door to door to drum up fear about these chargers, Linda reported, saying it's only a matter of time before we have an electrical fire, or that children will get electrocuted if they play near them. My jaw clenched. That's absolute nonsense. Modern EV chargers are designed with multiple layers of safety. Besides, kids messing with them is no more likely than kids sticking forks in outlets. I can't believe she's stooping to fear-mongering. Well, you know how it goes, Linda sighed. Some folks don't have all the facts, and Brenda has a knack for sounding authoritative. I felt an urge to drop everything, fly back, and confront Brenda in person. But I also had a job to do here in Chicago. An idea formed in my mind, a plan to use my corporate resources to thoroughly address the misinformation. I asked Linda to keep me posted on any new developments. Later that day, after delivering my keynote, I found myself in a boardroom with several of my senior engineers and PR specialists. We had been discussing new technologies for fast-charging stations nationwide. Suddenly, the Maple Bridge situation popped into my head with renewed urgency. I explained the scenario in a somewhat vague way, omitting personal details, but describing an HOA community with a group of EV chargers that were at risk of being removed due to misinformation. One of my engineers, a brilliant woman named Vera, said, maybe we could produce a simple educational packet, a layman-friendly breakdown of how safe and cost-effective chargers are. Provide stats, references to official standards, real data. Our PR head, Kevin, nodded enthusiastically. Yes, we do that type of outreach for city councils all the time. People often fear what they don't understand. I leaned forward, my mind racing. Could we tailor it specifically to a suburban audience, with easy bullet points and some local case studies? Vera and Kevin exchanged glances. Absolutely, Vera said. We can gather that data quickly. Not sure how you plan to deliver it, but we can design a PDF or even a small presentation if needed. I grinned. Let's do it. And also, do we have a test engineer or someone who could come with me in person to do a demonstration? Kevin chuckled. Going to show them how an EV charger works in real time? That's exactly what I'm thinking, I said. Maybe some neighbors just need to see how straightforward and safe it is. And if people see an actual professional from our company, it might lend credibility. That afternoon, while the rest of the world was listening to me talk about upcoming EV models, I was hatching a personal plan to thwart Brenda's misguided vendetta back at Maple Bridge. I emailed Linda the rough idea. We'd hold a special EV Awareness Day at the community clubhouse, open to all residents. We'd bring an engineer, have an actual charging demonstration, pass around a Q&A leaflet, and dispel myths. If we could saturate the community with correct information, we might have a chance to counter Brenda's propaganda before the vote. Linda was thrilled. She talked to Oliver, who volunteered to help with any logistics. June and Bill offered to invite as many neighbors as they could. Even Harriet, a longtime resident who was known for being aloof, expressed interest. People were tired of Brenda's draconian tactics. This event might give them the information they needed to push back. The only challenge was that we had to do it fast, before the scheduled vote next week. The timing was tight, but I was determined. If I had to use the weight of my position to airlift a small team to Maple Bridge, so be it. I was done playing nice with Brenda's attempts to sabotage progress in the name of her personal biases. Back in Maple Bridge, the next Saturday dawned cool and overcast. In the clubhouse parking lot, I directed a pair of staffers from my company who had arrived with a demonstration trailer. The trailer housed a mobile EV charger unit powered by advanced safety technology, something we often took to trade shows. Vera, our engineer, busied herself with setting up displays that explained how Level 2 and Level 3 chargers worked. Kevin, our PR rep, arranged a table with colorful brochures titled 10 Common Myths About EV Charging and Why They're Wrong. We had coffee, pastries, and a friendly sign inviting neighbors to come learn and ask questions. Almost immediately, folks started trickling in. Oliver led a small group of curious residents. Linda hustled over with half a dozen neighbors from her street. Soon, we had a respectable crowd of about 30 or 40 people milling around, reading the displays, sampling donuts, and peppering Vera with questions. How much electricity does an EV charger really draw? Could a short circuit start a fire? How much do they cost to operate? Is it really cheaper than gas? Vera, an excellent communicator, patiently addressed each question. She cited official research and used analogies easy for laypeople to understand. Kevin chimed in to provide examples from other neighborhoods that had successfully adopted EV chargers with no problems. People's skepticism gradually melted away, replaced by curiosity and cautious optimism. It became clear that, beyond the small group of hardline Brenda supporters, many in Maple Bridge actually wanted more sustainable options. They'd simply been scared by misinformation. In real time, I could see the tide turning. But of course, the event was interrupted. Halfway through, an angry voice cut across the chatter. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Everyone turned to see Brenda marching across the parking lot in her signature pastel cardigan, face set in an outraged scowl. She pointed an accusatory finger at the demonstration trailer. "Who authorized this?" she demanded, turning to me. "You can't just set up a commercial display without HOA clearance." I maintained a calm demeanor, though my pulse quickened. "Brenda, we're just hosting an informational session. There's no commercial activity. Everything here is free. We're not selling anything." She bristled. "It doesn't matter. You still need HOA permission to stage an event like this on common property. And you didn't bother to consult the board or me." Oliver stepped forward. "Brenda, Harold said it was fine. He signed off on it yesterday. We explained it was purely educational." Brenda blinked, momentarily thrown off. You circumvented the usual procedure. Harold can't just unilaterally allow it." Linda lifted an eyebrow. "You do it all the time, Brenda. Isn't that how you got your rummage sale fundraiser last month without so much as a board vote?" A ripple of amusement spread through the crowd. Brenda's face flushed. She tried to regroup, glaring at the demonstration trailer. "This is blatant propaganda. We all know EV chargers are a safety hazard, and they drive up our HOA fees." That was my cue. "Actually, Brenda, those statements are not based on facts," I said, gesturing to the array of official documents on the table. "Professional engineers have studied this thoroughly. Properly installed chargers are perfectly safe. As for fees, the cost is far less than you imply, and any usage can be recouped through minimal surcharges or grants." She stood stiff, refusing to look at the displays. "I don't care about your so-called data. The truth is, Maple Bridge doesn't need these contraptions. We have other priorities for the budget." Someone in the crowd, one of the older residents who'd quietly listened, murmured, "But this is the future. It's time we moved forward." Another neighbor nodded in agreement. A small wave of affirmation flowed through the gathering. Suddenly, Brenda realized that public sentiment was shifting away from her. Furious, she threw up her hands. "Fine. Have your little show," she snapped. "But don't be surprised if the board votes to remove every last charger. I'll see to it personally." She stormed off, leaving a tense silence in her wake. Linda placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Don't mind her. We appreciate what you're doing." Vera and Kevin looked shaken, but I reassured them quietly that we'd done nothing wrong. The event continued, with many folks visibly reassured by the information they learned. Still, Brenda's abrupt interruption cast a shadow. I knew she would retaliate. The only question was how far she'd go. The days flew by, and the pivotal HOA meeting approached. The rumor on the street was that Brenda was making calls to residents, exaggerating concerns, and even offering some kind of exchange of favors if they supported her push to remove the EV chargers. She seemed desperate to salvage her image and control. Meanwhile, I tried to rally support among neighbors who favored keeping the chargers. We collected signatures, had door-to-door conversations, and distributed easy-to-read leaflets summarizing the facts. Many residents were now informed and willing to stand up against Brenda's misinformation. For once, it felt like the community was starting to unify against her iron-fisted rule. Then something happened that nobody expected, or at least, nobody wanted to believe possible. Late one night, a loud bang echoed from the clubhouse area. A few neighbors claimed they saw a dark figure with a baseball bat or crowbar lurking near the EV stalls. By the time anyone arrived to check, the person was gone. But the chargers were not untouched. The housing of each station had been dented, scratched, and in one case, a display screen was shattered. Whoever it was had done a number on the units. The next morning, Linda called me, panic in her voice. "Did you see? The chargers have been vandalized." I rushed over to find a crowd of onlookers around the battered chargers. Bits of plastic and metal lay strewn on the pavement. 2 of the 4 stations were operational but damaged. The other 2 seemed completely offline. People stood around shaking their heads, snapping pictures on their phones, or trying to guess who was responsible. Brenda was conspicuously absent. Oliver turned to me. "We found shoe prints, and maybe a partial fingerprint on one of the smashed screens. We've called the police." He looked grim. "You don't think Brenda?" I swallowed hard. Could Brenda have stooped so low as to physically destroy the chargers just to ensure they'd be removed? It was a shocking, brazen act. Then again, who else had such a vocal vendetta? Linda's eyes glistened with tears of anger. "I can't believe this is happening." We were finally making progress. I tried to steady my own fury. "Let's not jump to conclusions," I said, though my heart pounded. "The police will investigate. Let them do their job. Meanwhile, we should see if the units can be repaired or replaced." Even as I said it, I knew in my gut that this act had Brenda's fingerprints all over it, figuratively, if not literally. Her hostility was well known, and the sabotage occurred right before the big vote. Now she could argue that the chargers were too damaged to be saved. Worse, it might scare people into thinking they were a magnet for criminal activity. When the police arrived, they took statements, cordoned off the area, and dusted for prints. An officer asked if anyone had reason to believe they knew the perpetrator. Everyone looked at each other, hesitant, and none of us wanted to slander Brenda without proof. Still, a few residents repeated that she'd openly threatened to remove the chargers. The officer took notes, looking troubled. We parted ways, hearts heavy. The vote was only 3 days away, and the chargers were in ruins. Brenda was nowhere to be found that day, presumably lying low until the meeting. Or so I assumed. I decided enough was enough. If it turned out she was behind this, she needed to face the consequences, and not just from the HOA. Vandalizing property was a criminal act. My next move was to call my corporate legal department and privately ask about the best course of action if an HOA official was found to have committed sabotage. I didn't reveal the neighborhood or name, only a hypothetical scenario. The attorneys expressed alarm and said the matter should be handed over to law enforcement for possible prosecution. That evening, I sat in my study, ignoring a stack of emails about an upcoming product launch. My mind spun with possible next steps. My phone buzzed, Linda again. She sounded determined. "We can't let her intimidate us. There's talk in the neighborhood about going to the meeting in force. What do you think? Do we gather a crowd?" "Yes," I said quietly, my voice firm. "We gather everyone we can. This intimidation cannot stand." The night of the HOA vote arrived, and the tension in Maple Bridge was palpable. Neighbors filed into the clubhouse, more of them than I'd ever seen in one place. It was clear that the vandalism had galvanized them. No matter which side they were on, everyone wanted answers and a resolution. Inside, the usual row of folding chairs was expanded to accommodate the larger crowd. Harold, the nominal HOA president, sat at the center of the front table, looking jittery. To his left sat Brenda, arms crossed, face grim. 2 other board members hovered at the end of the table, exchanging uneasy glances. After a brief introduction, Harold cleared his throat. "We're here tonight to address a number of community issues, most notably the electric vehicle charging stations. There has been a motion brought forth by Vice President Armitage." He turned to Brenda, who gave a small nod, "to remove the chargers entirely, citing various concerns." Murmurs rose from the audience. Harold gestured for silence. "Additionally, there has been an incident of vandalism." Brenda cut in. "Yes, a terrible crime. But it proves that these chargers invite troublemakers. That's precisely what we've been warning about. They're a hazard. They attract criminal mischief. Shouts erupted from the crowd. Oliver jumped to his feet, outraged. You're twisting this. You have no proof that criminals from outside were involved. For all we know. Harold banged a gavel, trying to restore order. Let's keep this civil. We'll proceed in an orderly fashion. Linda rose and approached the microphone set up for public comment. Her voice trembled with anger. The sabotage occurred days before this vote. It's convenient timing, wouldn't you say? A lot of residents believe we shouldn't remove the chargers just because one person is out to destroy them. Brenda gave a thin-lipped smile. I understand your frustration, Linda, but sometimes we have to make hard choices to protect the community. The damage to these machines could cost thousands to fix. Money that comes from your pockets, I might add. I felt a nudge from Vera, who had come at my invitation. She whispered, Do you want me to speak as an engineer? I nodded and motioned for her to go ahead. Vera stepped up to the mic, calmly introducing herself as an EV charging specialist who had recently done an educational event in Maple Bridge. She explained how the chargers could be repaired and how insurance or manufacturer warranties might cover much of it. She highlighted a local government incentive that would offset the repair costs if we proved this was an act of vandalism. Her presentation was succinct and persuasive. Some in the crowd applauded softly, while others looked uncertain. Brenda seized the mic. That's all well and good, but how do we know the chargers won't just be vandalized again? That's a repeated expense. And clearly, these contraptions are dangerous enough to attract violence. A loud groan ran through the room. I decided it was time to step in. I approached the mic. My heart pounded, but I took a deep breath. My name is... I hesitated, then continued. My name is Andrew Ellis. Some of you know me as your neighbor. What you may not know is that I'm the CEO of a large electric vehicle company. I heard a collective gasp ripple through the crowd. Brenda's eyes went wide. I continued. I've worked in the EV industry for over a decade. I've seen countless neighborhoods adopt chargers without incident. The vandalism here is not the fault of the technology, but the fault of a person intent on destroying it. We shouldn't let criminal behavior dictate that we remove something valuable from our community. Brenda recovered herself, fixing me with a glare. This is quite the surprise, Andrew. You never mentioned your occupation. Are you sure you aren't pushing this for personal gain? She attempted to sound calm, but I heard the venom underlying her words. I shook my head. I don't profit from Maple Bridge's chargers, Brenda. If anything, I donated time and resources to educate neighbors about their benefits. My interest is purely in supporting sustainable infrastructure. Brenda scoffed. That's what you say? But how can we be sure? Maybe your company stands to gain from these chargers in some roundabout way. Before I could reply, Oliver spoke up from his seat. Even if he did, who cares? We want them, and they serve the community. We shouldn't remove them just to appease you. Applause and nods of agreement spread through the room. Harold banged the gavel again, though more gently this time. Let's move toward a vote. We have a motion on the table to remove the chargers. All in favor, please raise your hand. Brenda thrust her arm in the air, along with 3 or 4 others, mostly the small clique that always sided with her. I counted maybe 5 or 6 hands in total. Harold cleared his throat. All opposed to removing the chargers? A sea of hands rose. I glanced around, feeling a burst of relief. Easily 30 or more were voting no. Even the 2 other board members raised their hands against the motion. Brenda looked around in horror. She'd lost her power to sway people on this issue. Harold recorded the votes. The motion fails, he declared. The chargers will remain. A wave of chatter and applause swept the room. Brenda's face had gone stark red. She half stood, gripping the table's edge as though in shock. Despite my exhilaration, I felt a pang of worry. Brenda might not give up. She had lost the battle, but something told me she wasn't done fighting. Sure enough, the very next day, Maple Bridge was rocked by a scandal. The police detective assigned to the vandalism case released a statement indicating they'd found evidence tying Brenda's SUV to the scene. Tire tracks matching her vehicle were discovered in fresh mud near the chargers that night. Moreover, a single partial fingerprint recovered from a piece of shattered plastic was a match for Brenda's right index finger. While not definitive proof, it was enough to bring her in for questioning. News spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. People were shocked, but also, on some level, they weren't. Brenda's obsession with removing the chargers had been so public and so extreme that many concluded she'd simply taken a more direct route to achieve her goal. Even some of her allies began to distance themselves from her, claiming they had no idea she'd go so far. Linda knocked on my door to share the news, face alight with mingled triumph and concern. They might actually arrest her. Can you believe it? I ran a hand through my hair. I had a feeling she was behind it, but I never thought she'd be foolish enough to leave evidence. She's done for, if this is all confirmed. Oliver joined us, having tagged along. The entire neighborhood is buzzing. Some are outraged, others are giddy. But the board is in chaos. Harold called an emergency meeting for tonight to address Brenda's position as vice president. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction. Another part worried about the damage already done. Even if Brenda was removed or arrested, the chargers were still in disrepair. It would take weeks to fix them, but at least we'd have closure, and maybe Maple Bridge could heal and move on. That afternoon, a police cruiser arrived at Brenda's home. Neighbors gathered at windows and sidewalks, watching as two officers knocked on her door. She stepped out, visibly shaking, her composure cracked. Cameras clicked, someone was filming on a phone. The officers spoke with her briefly, and though she tried to argue, they led her to the car. She wasn't in handcuffs yet, but it was clear she was being taken for further questioning. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Linda called me in excitement. They're taking her in. This is happening. I watched from my own window, feeling a twinge of pity despite everything. Brenda had chosen her path. She had to face the consequences. I only wondered what she'd say in her own defense. Hours later, social media erupted with speculation. Some people posted that Brenda had confessed. Others claimed she was denying everything, insisting her print might have gotten on the charger some other time. But the evidence seemed compelling enough to hold her. The charge was felony vandalism. If convicted, she faced serious fines or even jail time. As dusk fell, Maple Bridge seemed eerily quiet, as though bracing for a storm that had suddenly turned on its axis. The woman who once exercised so much control over the neighborhood was now behind bars, or at least in the custody of the legal system. The pettiness of her vendetta, culminating in this crime, was astounding. Harold convened a short meeting that night, publicly announcing that Brenda was suspended from all HOA duties pending the investigation. He apologized for not recognizing signs of this behavior sooner. The crowd at the clubhouse was subdued, still processing the situation. More than a few lingered after the meeting to shake my hand, thanking me for standing up to her. I deflected praise, reminding them that everyone played a role in ensuring the chargers stayed. But privately, I felt a profound sense of relief. Maybe I could finally live in Maple Bridge without walking on eggshells. The days that followed brought more revelations. Police records indicated that Brenda had used a crowbar to inflict damage on the chargers, leaving behind tiny flecks of paint from the tool that matched a crowbar found in her garage. When questioned why her fingerprint was on the plastic shards, she claimed she'd once inspected the units. Detectives found her story implausible, given the crowbar paint evidence and multiple eyewitness accounts placing her car near the scene at the time of the vandalism. One neighbor even came forward to say they saw a woman matching Brenda's build leaving the scene in a hurry. By the end of the week, the district attorney's office formally charged Brenda with felony vandalism, malicious destruction of property, and reckless endangerment, since the sabotage could have caused electrical hazards. Bail was set higher than expected, possibly reflecting the brazen nature of her actions. Unable to post bail right away, she remained in county jail. Rumors flew that her financial situation wasn't as stable as she portrayed. Indeed, she had always bragged about her financial savvy, but her meltdown suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, HOA members discovered more unsavory details. Brenda had apparently misappropriated some HOA funds to cover personal legal expenses in the past. She'd quietly diverted money under the guise of office fees and administrative costs. The board immediately froze her privileges and began a deep audit. What they found was staggering, thousands of dollars unaccounted for. That triggered another investigation, with the possibility of additional charges. With her position revoked, and in the face of mounting legal trouble, Brenda's future in Maple Bridge looked bleak. Lawyers working for the HOA filed a civil suit to recover the missing funds and cover the cost of repairing or replacing the EV chargers. They also filed liens against her property. If she couldn't pay, her house and other assets might be seized. The once mighty Brenda Armitage, nicknamed Karen, who lorded her authority over everyone else, was now facing a real-life meltdown of epic proportions. Word spread that she was trying to sell the house to pay for her legal defense. But with a criminal case pending and a civil suit, buyers were scarce. Eventually, the bank foreclosed. Brenda lost her property. Some said she'd attempted to strike a plea deal, but the vandalism, combined with evidence of fraud, left little room for leniency. In a final blow, the judge handed down a harsh sentence. Brenda would serve time in prison. The property was seized and sold off at auction to partially compensate the HOA. The day she was officially taken away to start her sentence, a hush fell over Maple Bridge. Neighbors peered from behind curtains. A few felt sorrow, most felt relief. After so many months, and even years, of her hostility, a new chapter was beginning for the community. As for me, I watched from my porch with conflicting emotions. I never wanted to see someone's life completely destroyed, but Brenda had brought it on herself. With Brenda gone, Maple Bridge rallied together to repair the damage, literally and figuratively. The HOA board appointed new members, including Linda, who promised more transparency and a friendlier approach. They voted on a budget reallocation to fix the chargers and even expand them. We secured an additional grant, courtesy of some connections I had through my company, and soon Maple Bridge boasted a set of new, higher-capacity charging stations, complete with improved security features. People began treating each other with renewed warmth. The sense of fear and suspicion that Brenda had fostered was replaced by cooperation. Younger families felt freer to let their kids play outdoors without worrying that the HOA would slap them with fines. Older residents finally embraced a sense of peace. Even Harold seemed relieved to have the burden of Brenda's tyranny lifted. He stepped down from the presidency, citing stress, and the new leadership that replaced him was more progressive and open. One sunny afternoon, I arrived home to find a handwritten note on my doorstep from a neighbor I scarcely knew. It read, "Thank you for everything you did to preserve the chargers and bring truth to our community. My husband and I just bought an EV, and we're loving it. We appreciate your efforts more than you know. The Jenkins family." Smiling, I stepped inside, recalling the day I moved here. I'd craved a peaceful place to unwind from my hectic career. Fate had other plans, embroiling me in a battle over something I cared deeply about. But in the end, my knowledge and resources helped Maple Bridge triumph over fear and misinformation. In the weeks and months that followed, the story spread well beyond our neighborhood. Newspaper headlines like "Local HOA Official Jailed for EV Charger Sabotage" captured public imagination. Environmental groups hailed Maple Bridge as an example of a community that stood up for sustainability. Other HOAs reached out, asking how they could integrate EV chargers without controversy. And for me, it was a profound lesson. Even in the most unexpected of places, you might find yourself called to defend your principles. Sometimes, the battles for progress happen not in corporate boardrooms or political arenas, but in quiet suburban corners, where one stubborn tyrant can threaten to halt the march of innovation. If we stand together, armed with facts and a shared sense of purpose, we can overcome even the loudest naysayers. Brenda, Karen, paid the ultimate price for her stubbornness and aggressive impulses. Severe punishment, jail time, loss of property, and complete social disgrace. But Maple Bridge emerged stronger, learning the value of community, transparency, and forward-thinking solutions. At last, under the golden glow of freshly installed street lamps, life in this once turbulent neighborhood found a new kind of harmony.